Hello, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming out. My name is Trevor Groth. I am Director of Programming for the festival, and I'm very happy. Thank you. I am happy to introduce today's Power of Story panel, Indies Go Hollywood. It's presented by Dropbox. I'd like to thank them for their support of this panel. Sundance has long been sort of a launching pad for directors who get their start here with independent film and then go on to work in the studio world. And we thought it would be very interesting to hear a conversation about what exactly that experience is like and what that transition is like. And so we are very happy to have three of our favorite Sundance alum here to talk about that experience. And to moderate the conversation today, we're very happy to have a longtime friend of Sundance, an attendee of the festival, KPCC Radio's host of The Frame, John Horn. And, yep. Before I bring him up, I just want to make an announcement that please no flash photography or no video of the panel. And now, please welcome John Horn.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for showing up. We're going to talk for as long as it's interesting, and then we'll take audience questions. So don't leave unless it's really boring, but it won't be. I'm going to start by bringing up a director of a movie that has a guy with big arms and a hammer, but also a great film called Hunt for the Wilder People, Taika Waititi.
I'm supposed to sit there. She said I sit there.
No, it's my seat.
No, she said I sit here.
Oh my God, we're already fighting over seats.
This is a disaster. It's already, is it?
It's
my
taken.
seat.
Oh my God,
No,
okay.
It's Taika's seat. It was her accent.
See who the director is here. Next, she was here with the movie 13, then she made a movie with vampires, Catherine Hardwicke.
Hello. Is that my seat?
I don't know. Maybe I'm sitting over here. I think that's
Okay.
Here.
And then finally, he was here with a movie first, Better Luck Tomorrow. Now he makes movies with guys who drive cars really fast. Justin Lin. We're going to do a team photo, and then we'll start our conversation. So team photo time.
All right.
Team photo.
You can...
Ready?
Look.
Yeah. Okay.
Taika.
Thank you.
Okay, let's get going. Justin, I think your film was the first of all of the panelists to play here. You had Better Luck Tomorrow here in 2002?
Yep.
Right? Driving up Main Street, coming into the Egyptian, what are your memories of that first experience of bringing a film here, and what strikes your, what do you recall about that day?
Cluelessness, I think. I mean, literally, the Better Luck Tomorrow was the true indie in that sense that it was a $250,000 credit card movie, and we were barely able to even come out here.
Have you paid that back?
I remember getting my first studio gig and getting the call saying, "Now you're not broke. you're at zero." So it took a few years. Seriously.
Yeah.
And that was a movie that came to Park City without distribution. It was picked up by MTV Films, and there's something that happened, I think, at the third screening of that film that is notable, where during a Q&A, somebody started attacking you in the film for the way you were depicting Asian Americans on screen, and somebody stood up from the back of the audience and gave that person a smackdown. Who was that person, and how important was that to the film?
It was Roger Ebert, and it was our last question of the night, and it really kind of framed everything for the discourse, and it made all the difference. And I remember we were there, and they were trying to clear out the theater for the next screening, and nobody would leave. And it's one of those moments where you could just feel the energy, and people that had very different points of view were able to express it in a very loud manner, I think.
Catherine, what about bringing 13 here in 2003?
Oh my God, totally surreal. We are in the in the lab, like on New Year's Eve and Christmas Eve, and, trying to pull it together to be here just in time. That's all you're thinking about. I just want to finish the movie and get it there. And then at Eccles, that Friday night, you're just dazzled, like you don't even know what hit you. And there seemed to be this huge energy there. And, we had tried to sell it to like Fox Searchlight and get them to finance the movie. And they said, no, you have to make it on your own. And if we like it, we'll, be there at the Eccles and buy it. And we got that call that night. We like it.
But you had to go through all the waiting to make sure
Well,
they
we had
liked it.
to
Right.
find the money another way, make it and everything, and then screen it. And when it was finished, they bought it.
And Taika, what about bringing Eagle versus Shark here in 2007?
Just so amazing. I didn't mean that to sound like that. It was amazing, and it was in this theater right here, and it was and at night this is like a really smelly room, and it's like sweaty and just and but it was amazing, and then and that was already picked up, so I didn't have the stress of like, oh, is someone going to buy this thing? And then it went on to have a cinema release in America with 17 people seeing it.
So how did you go from that first film to your first studio financed film? Justin, I'm going to start with you because I think you went straight is maybe not the right word, more or less directly from Better Luck Tomorrow to Annapolis. How did that happen?
I felt like as a filmmaker, I wanted to always have context and perspective. And I went to UCLA Film School. It was great in that it was there to kind of, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, Bruins. It was great to kind of, no? What?
Taika's no fan, yeah.
It was a great experience, but I think I remember going from, it was literally like less than a month, going from nobody returning calls, no reps, showing up to Sundance, or getting into Sundance and then getting calls, hundreds of calls, literally every day. And so I wanted to just kind of try that while it was still kind of there. And, I didn't know anything. I didn't have anybody to really talk to. And I was reading a lot of scripts, and Nina Jacobson had this script at Disney, and we went in a room, and she's like, you're gonna make this, let's go do it. And it was really great. I kind of just went with my gut, and we went to Philly. I remember showing up and seeing all the trucks, and I'm like, I don't even know what a script supervisor really does, because I did it myself, so it was a really good learning experience, and just seeing how many people it took to just to support, and to bring vision to the screen. And even before that film was done, Universal called and said, we want you to take over fast. And it really was that decision of saying, hey, I just want to learn, because at school, a lot of times we sit around and we talk, and people were like, I would never make Mighty Ducks 6. And I'm like, well, do you even have a chance to make Mighty Ducks 6? I don't know. That's a UCLA discussion. We're there, we talk about it. So it was just for me, it was just trying to figure out what, it was so clear. It went from, credit card movie, it was just passion. There was a story we wanted to tell, but very quickly you hit the commerce of it.
Right.
No, we couldn't get funding, and then you gotta get distribution, and then exhibition, and all that. I was still very, I was very young, and I didn't understand it, and I wanted to get a better handle on that, and that's been my journey the last 15 years.
Wow. By the way, Disney is looking for a director for Mighty Ducks 7, which is now in development. Catherine, you go from 13 to Lords of Dogtown to Nativity Story to Twilight. How would you describe that graduation? And was there one step that was bigger than the other, and how that biggest step came about?
Well, I was a little different because I had been working as a production designer on studio films. So I had, worked on Vanilla Sky and Three Kings with Cameron Crowe and David O. Russell. So I kind of knew about all the trucks and the script. So I was kind of used to also a front row seat to the studio politics, because I'd be in the van when we're scouting for Three Kings, and I'd hear Chuck Robin and David O. Russell and all the wild things that go on. And so I was a little bit prepared to be launched into a very supportive atmosphere with Amy Pascal at Lords of Dogtown at Sony. And I was living in, Dogtown. I live in Dogtown area, and they had seen 13, and they recommended me to do that. So it was kind of a natural fit because it was kind of rough and tumble film. And so the scaling up wasn't so difficult at that time. But as it went on, as I got more involved in the studio politics, that was an interesting thing to navigate. How do you keep your voice and not, in my case, gender case, not be, bossy or emotional, but be visionary and powerful. And that's always a good challenge. Yeah.
We will definitely come back to that topic.
Okay.
Taika, I'm going to ask about you. So you have Eagle versus Shark in 2007, then you have Boy, then we do What We Do in the Shadows. And I suspect those films, What We Do in the Shadows is not gone, it's coming back, right? But between that film and Hunt for Wilder People premiering, you get Thor, but Thor comes your way before Hunt for Wilder People is released, is that right?
Yeah, I was still editing. I've found like a good life hack that you edit your movies in Hawaii. And it's like, I don't know why no one's doing this.
How did you pull that off?
Just go to Hawaii. So I was there doing that, and then I got a phone call saying that, Marvel's basically just given up and just looking for anyone now. So do you want to have a go at this Thor film? Because it was never part of my plan. I didn't have like a big sort of, make 4 New Zealand films and then make a studio film. It wasn't. It was just not a plan. I was going to go do more small films. And what was the question?
So how did that come about? I mean, so they make that call, they said, are you interested in Thor? What is the math that you say? Like, here's the pluses, here are the minuses. How do you figure out whether or not it's something that you can do and do the way you want to make a film, not the way that maybe Marvel wants to make its films?
Well, the first thing is you count how many children you have, and then you look at your mortgage, and then you go, I'll have that conversation. And then, it was, I've always loved comic books, and I've loved the idea of doing one of these films, but it just was, and for me it was, I guess the biggest fear was I've had basically complete control over all of my films. And I think the fear is like, is that going to be taken away? What's going to happen working with a studio? And I just I saw it as a good learning experience where I could, I felt very comfortable making my films, and I'll go back to doing those, but it just felt to me just to get out of my comfort zone and evolve a bit more as a filmmaker, this might be like quite a good move.
We have clips of all of your non-Sundance films. Justin, we're going to start with a clip from, I think it's your Star Trek film. So let's take a look at that. Then we're going to talk about how you retain some of your Sundanciness when you move to a big studio and make a film there.
Cool.
Ooh, Sundanciness.
But there are still 3 ships heading into Yorktown.
That's gotta be Krall. Keep on him, Spock! Do whatever it takes to stop him from using that weapon!
I
lose them, Doctor.
You're more than welcome to switch places with me, Spock.
Captain, intercepting all 3 ships is an impossibility.
Give me a schematic of Yorktown. There! Yorktown headquarters!
Mr. Chekhov, can you do a bioscan of Central Plaza?
Aye! They're clearing civilians!
Bones, there's a city plaza coming up. You gotta make sure Kroll heads for it.
Why?
Just do it! Sulu, get us up there!
Hold on to something!
So
That's very Sundance-y, I thought. Yeah.
it's very obvious the similarities to Better Luck Tomorrow. It's projected on a screen, and there's an Asian American actor who is trying to figure out what's going to happen next. So if you were to look at that scene or look at how you worked on that film, where would you say there are any ties to what you did in your first feature that played here and what we see up there?
There's actually a lot more than it looks like up there, but it was.
Better work hard on this one.
Yeah, no, the whole process of that film was like an indie movie because I was actually ready to do something else, and I got a call from JJ in January, and he said, "Are you a Star Trek fan?" I said, "Oh yeah, I grew up watching it with my dad," and he said, "Great, do you want to take it over?" I was like, "Huh." He said, "Well, there's no idea. You got to start, and we're going to shoot in June." And you have 3 days. So I was shooting something at the time, and I'm thinking, okay, can I come up with some...
3 days to come up with a story.
Just at least the world or just themes and character arcs. And I went in to meet with them. I said, yeah, I think I got it. We talked about it. And then I got on a plane with Simon and Doug, and we started going. And the thing that's really tough is that every idea is a build. Whether it's in CG or practical, it's a build. So that sequence was we were still building as we were shooting. And as we were writing the script, that's not like Better Luck Tomorrow. Better Luck Tomorrow, we did have a script,
right?
Which is, in Hollywood, that's really rare when you go shooting nowadays. But that was, I think, for me, with Better Luck Tomorrow, it was about trying to set up and tell stories through the characters. We rehearse, we talk about the lenses, and I didn't know any better. I would just, I board things, I talk about DP, about how we're gonna move. So there was a process that I continued to do. And then when I got into the big movies, on Fast, we were shooting 85 days, but there's a 50-day second unit. Second unit is crazy because, especially with cars.
With all the action scenes, right?
Well, because you have to plan it,
right.
And every day you're blowing at least $500,000 on that, so you don't get that day back. And so it wasn't even about process, it's about creating a culture of accountability so that, if we don't get the right shot, I like my cars landing on its roof, and they never land on a roof. So we got to have plan B, C, D, everything planned. So that was something that was very much kind of in the DNA of Better Luck Tomorrow and how we prep it and how we develop our unique process. Then I come to, Star Trek, and it was really interesting. Then there's another layer, because then I'm talking about process, and then you have thousands of people in the UK and Vancouver. They're trying to interpret what I'm talking about. And so I previs this, I talk about the shots, and then you go to artists, and the shots aren't coming in the way I'm thinking, because this is all developed from scratch.
Right.
And so I end up flying to UK and Vancouver, and I sit down with all the artists, and we had this big whiteboard, and I'm talking about, well, how do you get these shots? because there's an aesthetic to it that I want to feel like it's practical. I feel like there's actually a camera crew behind trying to capture, you know. And so that was, for me, was that goes all the way back to Better Luck Tomorrow. And I know a lot of the artists are like, well, it looks cool this way. And I'm like, well, then you'd be going Mach 5 trying to move the spaceship to get that shot. I don't think that's right, you know? And so you have these discussions. And I think ultimately, I wanted, hopefully, for the viewers to feel the humanity behind the shots composed. So that was, I would say that's probably the strongest connection to Better Luck Tomorrow.
Before we look at a clip from Twilight, I want to ask all of you, you probably want to the extent it's possible, retain some department heads, people you've worked with in your earliest films. But when you have to hire a key department head that you haven't worked with before, what would you say was the most important hire when you're stepping up in budget and scope in terms of a bigger studio film? Taika, what would you say was the most important hire you made as a department head on Thor?
I would say production designer for me, just because I got to hire my friend. And it's like one of the few people I got to bring with me. And for me, it's really important having that, just some consistency with people I work with. And
Marvel was okay with that for your bring?
They were happy with that because he had done lots of other things. Okay. And but I mean, usually my best friend would probably be the DP, but our DP didn't speak much English, so I couldn't be best friends.
Catherine, what about you?
We're still friends, but just.
If it was not somebody you'd worked with before, who was the most important hire for department head that you made on Twilight?
For me, it was the DP, and I had the same DP on 13 and Lords of Dogtown and Twilight, so that was very helpful. He stuck with me from the beginning and taught me a lot. Elliot Davis. Yeah.
And Justin, what about you?
I'd say line producer, production designer, DP, scripty. Scripty. Okay. Scripty is important because, like, we're there every moment.
They're there with you all day long.
Yeah. Right.
And they've got to be, yeah. I mean, mainly whenever I hire anyone, it's about personality more than actual talent. I just want nice people around me, and I don't like assholes. I don't like ego. It just bums me out to have to go to work and work with.
Well, that was the biggest learning curve for me, because I think going into these bigger movies sometimes, and I'm not judging, but sometimes people are clocking in and out.
Yeah.
And coming from indie worlds, like, we show up because we believe in something. So it's trying to change that culture to where we get up early in the morning, 4 in the morning. We want to challenge each other. Let's have fun.
And you're excited to go to work. You get in the car and, like, I'm still just like, no one has caught on to the fact that this is not a real job.
Yeah.
Like, we're just going to work and pretending stuff all day. And I'm always excited to go to work. I think once it feels like, gotta go make a movie, like, then I should probably quit. But so far it's still exciting.
Catherine, let's take a look at some of your Twilight footage, and we also have a little bit of behind the scenes from the making of the first Twilight movie.
Mine is a little closer to Sundance than what you just saw. Let me just put it that way.
We're not
the budget.
Not the spaceships from the Twilight.
Yeah.
From the, okay.
I'd rather nothing to do with this! His rage will make for more interesting sport than his feeble attempt to protect you. And let's continue. Very visually dynamic. I chose my stage well. It's too bad he didn't have the strength to turn you. Instead, he kept you this fragile little human. It's cruel, really. Tell Edward how much it hurts. Tell him to avenge him. Tell him. No, what are you doing? Tell him. Tell him. guess you're faster than the others. But not stronger. I'm strong enough to kill you. I'm sorry.
No spaceships.
So where would you say is the connective tissue between what you did here and what you did in Twilight?
Well, this leap wasn't so big a budget because we were in the 30s on the budget of Twilight, so we had a lot of action and a lot of locations, so we were still a little bit like an indie film, and this movie was under the radar at the time. Nobody thought it would make any money, so I didn't have quite the scrutiny, but I think that I tried to just make it as personal as I could, just like I did in 13, that you really felt what Kristen Stewart's going through, and just tried to be very personal. And that sequence in the book is not in the book, so we had to kind of invent that sequence, try to make it emotional and connecting. And then we had second unit on that too, which, had to dovetail, and Kristen Stewart was, underage, so she only could work 5.5 hours at that time. She was 17. So I had to have a lot of doubles, photo doubles, stunt doubles, and really coordinate, on a limited, we had like 3 days to shoot that. How do I do it? And, and there's a lot more to that sequence. And hand off to the second unit, so. It was interesting, all that stuff, new challenges, yeah.
What would you say was the hardest thing to learn how to do? I mean, you've been around movie sets, you'd worked on big budget features, but in terms of actually directing on a given day, where was the moment where it was the biggest leap up from what you'd done before in your films?
Well, I think exactly what you said, that I was very much about preparation. I studied as I was an architect before I was a production designer. So it's all about planning. And so I knew I would just have that many minutes to get that, or it cost, all this money, and I blew it. And I had X number of days to shoot. So I was very detailed, very prepared. I don't know if we're going to show it, but I think I put my shot list here and all that stuff, like how detailed and drilled down. The night before this sequence, I looked at the whole shot list, and I just realized I couldn't do it in those 3 days allotted. And I cut out like a chunk, like a whole little action beat myself. Nobody told me to. I said, I'm cutting this out, and really nobody noticed. So, this is like some of the...
This is your behind-the-scenes planning?
The second unit was yellow. The blue ones were non-Bella shots where I could use a photo double. This is just part, this was like a 10-page shot list, but I would do these things and keep refining them. I think there's another thing. I always did the, little diagram. Even though it's a very simple space, it did have mirrors on every wall. I tried to wear like a mirror so that I couldn't be seen, like a mirrored blanket. It didn't work. But anyway, I would always diagram out every little bit and be as prepared as I could so that people would believe that I knew what I was doing. And that was essential. And I think this is, we had some storyboards, but storyboard artists, money ran out. So, ran out partway through, and then you have to wing it after that. Yeah.
There's an expression that some film school teachers use, and that is let your budget be your aesthetic. That if you have $1 million, you're going to make a certain kind of film. If you have $100 million, you're going to make a certain kind of film. How does the budget dictate aesthetic for you, and what does that mean in terms of what you're able to do and what you're not able to do given the money you have?
Ooh, oh, that's a good question. Help.
I don't know if I totally agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you try to tell your story, and if you have $100 million idea and you only have $10 million, then you start asking the right questions,
Creative.
how to
How can I
make that
do it?
happen. But I think if you let the budget, that's where you lose your perspective, and I think the soul of the film.
In fact, the movie I just did, it's called Miss Bala with Gina Rodriguez for Sony. The budget was under 15, but they told me, we want this to look like James Bond. They literally said that. I said, that's a $200 million movie. So, yeah, we know that, but we still want it to look like James Bond. So that's when we started, coming up with, okay, let's do drone shots. Let's have one day of helicopter to open up the sequence. Had awesome second unit director, Jamie, who's here, who helped Russian arm, Mexican version of a Russian arm, because we shot it all in TJ at a real location where we could actually widen out, because it was the real location, current day. So, I agree with you. You have to stretch. You have to push.
Before we talk about Taika's movie, Catherine, I'm going to ask you a little bit about the way that people graduate from Sundance to Hollywood seems to be very heavily imbalanced in terms of gender, that for every Catherine Hardwicke, or for every Colin Trevorrow, David Lowery, Ryan Johnson, Gareth Edwards, there's one Catherine Hardwicke or one Ava DuVernay. Do you think that the way that the studios look at female directors is different from the way they look at men, and what are the obstacles that women face that men don't face in terms of taking that next step?
You have a couple hours, everybody? Couple of weeks, okay. Well, obviously this is our big topic that we're all talking about, and how to break through that unconscious gender bias that we all have and start to imagine that somebody that doesn't look like us could do it, that women don't have to be labeled as emotional when they're passionate, that actually emotion is even good, and embrace that. So there's so many ways that we're just trying to fight the fight every day, and we know it's true that they're looked at differently because the statistics just keep coming in and keep pounding us. But we're optimistic. I think that things are trying to change. Patty, Ava, everybody, every new breakthrough hopefully will break through more things. I know the reason I got hired on the movie I just did is because they probably thought, hey, it's not going to look too good if we don't hire a woman in this climate. Whatever, we'll take any incentive, to get hired. Guilt, shame, whatever. Diversity, inclusion, that's what we want.
Yes. Taika, let's look at something from Thor, then we'll talk about your graduation from Sundance to Marvel.
I love this movie. I can't wait to see this.
It's come to my attention that you don't know who I am. I am Hela, Odin's firstborn, the commander of the legions of Asgard, the rightful heir to the throne, and the goddess of death. My father is dead, as are the princes. You're welcome. We were once the seat of absolute power in the cosmos. Our supremacy was unchallenged, yet Odin stopped at 9 realms. Our destiny is to rule over all others. And I am here to restore that power. Kneel before me and rise into the ranks of my great conquest.
Whoever you are, whatever you've done, surrender now, or we will show you no mercy.
Whoever I am, did you listen to a word I said?
This is your last warning.
I thought you'd be happy to see me. Fine. Oh, I've missed this. Still, it's a shame. Good soldiers dying for nothing. All because they couldn't see the future. Sad. Oh, look, still alive. Change of heart?
Go back to whatever cave you crept out of. You evil demoness.
Let's go see my palace.
Seems too violent now.
But there's a sense of humor, there's a sense of playfulness that's been true in all of your movies. When you're talking to Marvel about what you want to preserve from your past films in this film, is that an easy negotiation? Is it that this is the movie I'm going to make?
Well, it's the only thing I had, because I hadn't done one of these things before, so that's all I had to offer. Yeah, but they were very supportive of that. You know, like we improvised a lot on set, and I just get to throw lines at these guys, and it was a very exactly like all my other films. I felt like a lot of freedom in that sense. And as Justin was saying about the real hard part was actually in post, dealing with all the vendors and having to talk to people in other countries and say, it wasn't supposed to look like that. Yeah, and you're trying to explain what you want, and but on set, all that stuff, there was a lot of freedom. And with Marvel, they encouraged it. They, I'm surprised with the stuff they let me put in the film. Which is great, because they're changing it up all the time. But they were very encouraging of the humour, the irreverence, and very much and the other stuff that I've done with my other films.
When you're making a non-studio film, part of the challenge and part of the reward is, finding people who will believe in you to finance your film, getting into a festival, getting a distribution deal. Those are all the necessary steps of making an independent film, and none of those are really present when you're making a studio film. It's kind of reverse engineered. This is your release date. This is when it's going to come out. These are the terms. This is how much money you're going to get. Does that change the satisfactions of doing the job? That when you're making a Sundance movie, the challenge is like getting it seen by people. When you're making a studio film, it's dealing with the whole machinery and politics of the studio.
Well, actually, sometimes I've been called by the studio, and I have to sell. It's their project. They have the material, and then I have to sell it to them. And I think that's kind of common. You have to pitch it. They have to be sure it's, that they like your vision. You have to do a lot of work to get them to want to make their own movie that they hired you to do.
Yeah.
At least that's happened to me.
Is that true?
Yeah. But also, I'm not very, I think some people bristle at the idea of working with a studio and it's my vision, but I'm very easy to work with. And it's also their source material. I'm not going to come with when I invented Thor, this was my vision for Thor. I was like, it's your character, do what you want, but this is what I think you should do. But luckily they're very, they like the conversation and they like being challenged. Mm-hmm. These guys do. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, I think I've learned that you're always dealing with human beings. You feel, when you do the indie, you feel the pressure, but everybody signed on for the right reason, and you're going this journey together, and hopefully you get to get a distribution deal and people get to see it. On these big budget movies, if they call it tentpole for a reason, it's usually like $500 million sitting on there. You can feel that pressure, and I think for me it was learning about the humanity behind it. Making sure that instead of we're fighting, I'm going to marketing first, because I don't want to be reactive, And usually when I have my previs, I start sharing with the marketing. I start talking to the studio very early on, and it's always very important to me that initial conversation. And I've been very lucky because once we decide what that movie is, I'm not going to veer away from that. And that to me, that's always worked. Because I don't like to be able to kind of change it. And look, it is crazy when you go into test screening, there's 20 suits sitting behind you, and there's 600 people. And man, when you earn that laugh, it feels, oh my God, you can't fake that, you know? And
I told you it was funny.
it is that's a sea of humanity that you can't control. If they're going to like the movie. You can feel in that room if they like the movie or not like the movie, you know? And I think to be able to have to course correct it at that point, you're screwed. So I think you want to commit early on. You want to get the tone. You want to get the themes. You want to talk through all that.
Yeah.
And then getting to know the rest of there's hundreds of people working on it and making sure you have the right conversations at the right time.
I've got a question. When you were hoping that laugh is going to come, had you pre-tested on any friends and family just to be sure it's going to be funny? Either of you guys?
Well, the thing about friends and family screenings, there's never friends or family there.
Yeah.
There's just strangers. And so sometimes if the joke works, I like testing out jokes all the time, and you always record the audience, and then you play it back, and you're always having fights in the edit suite about what worked, what didn't work, and you go and watch the tape,
did laugh.
and you watch
That
the
was a
audience.
good laugh.
Yeah, or they're asleep, or and so I get very defensive about jokes. I mean, if they don't laugh, I'm like, you just got a whole lot of idiots for that screening.
But you do have the opportunity, generally with a studio film, if you don't race to release date, to have a lot of previews and have a lot of testing, and they're going to be focused on how many people rank the film in the top 2 boxes based on how much they like it. You don't have that typically when you're making an independent film. So how does that change the creative process in terms of what you're making in relationship to the audience, and whether or not the studio is going to sign off on your version of the film?
To me, I get that when you look at boxes and stuff, but it doesn't. That day after, though, they have all the data points and stuff, and it doesn't. For me, it has never mattered, because when the film works at the end, they're just going to give you more money to go shoot stuff. Which I remember on Fast 5, we were so over budget in the sense that I wanted to flip this bus that was the beginning of the film. It never got on page, and when we had our test screening, they're like, "Well, what else do you need?" And I said, "I want $2 million to flip this bus," and got the 2, so
this guy.
That's just
the
number
the boxes.
of Sundance movies that could be made for the amount of money you spent flipping a bus.
100%, but not even that. Not even flipping a bus, just like the cost of one little set that might not even be in the movie, or the lunch budget or something,
Yeah.
And but to those boxes with the test audiences, with every screening, we had at least one of these cards come back and was like, "What did you love about the film? It was really funny. What did you hate about the film? Too many jokes."
Catherine, can you talk a little bit about the testing process and how you work in that framework, because it's necessary for most studio films?
Right, but I would say this to indie filmmakers, and those aren't going to be quite on the budget level of these two. I still used almost the same process when I tested 13. I took the studio form and just tried it out, a little modified version with my recruited friends and family. And on 13, we had 13 and Twilight, I asked people to bring 3 more people that I didn't know, and then I made everybody raise their right hand. You're not going to talk about this to anyone, sign an NDA. And I did get kind of a lot of information by doing that, and I had the forms too that were very similar, almost the same as the NRG forms. So it was I used it as a learning tool. Like, okay, I thought that was the funniest joke in the world, but nobody else got it at all. Maybe I need to tweak it a little bit, or wow, they really were with it till the end of the movie, or they did, So I think it can be useful.
I think it's important. I think definitely, on all my films I've tested with friends, but in Wellington, you run out of people pretty fast. So the last screening that Jermaine and I did for What We Do in the Shadows was me, Jermaine, and one person in my lounge watching the movie. It was just we're just looking at him. And he was in the movie. But it's important, because then and often it's not even, for me, it's sometimes not even about the written comments. It's just about reading the room. You can sit in there, and as soon as you feel uncomfortable, you should make a note of the time.
Yeah.
You're like,
Or you're embarrassed.
I'm
like,
embarrassed. Yeah,
Or like you just feel, they found that little weak part that I tried to put the wallpaper and Band-Aid over it and make it work. It didn't work.
Yeah, they can catch it. You could feel it in the room. That's the most amazing thing. I could feel frame cuts in that screening.
Ooh, yeah. When you see it with other people, that's when you learn the most. And but I like people to write. I usually give people like a paper that they can just write anything they want without an anonymous, have at least 20 or 30 people there, so they feel a little bit more anonymous. And even if they said to me, "Oh, that was awesome," then I read the paper at home. Oh no, hated that. I learn, and if a bunch of people say the same thing, then you need to look at it. If only one weirdo doesn't like his boots, then I don't worry about it.
We and with what we're doing in the shadows, we premiered it here years ago in this room, and me and Jermaine were sitting at the back, and we were just like elbowing each other. It's like, we've got to fix that. And we'd finished the film. It was the premiere, and we took the film back. Like, it was very uncomfortable. We got up on stage, and Jermaine goes, and there were like buyers in the room, and he's like, "Oh, we've still got work to do." So we went home and like shot more stuff and like worked on it for a few more months. And you don't, I mean, that's one difference. You don't get to do that on a studio film. You don't get to premiere it and then go,
it's already out
"Oh,
in the
yeah, we
public,
can make that better."
One of the things I'm curious about is how you prevent the tail wagging the dog. You are all working with franchises, with Star Trek, Fast and Furious, with Twilight, with Thor and Marvel, and they have agendas. It's like we have books, we have merchandise, we have plush toys, we have marketing materials.
Pillowcases with Rob Pattinson's face on it.
Exactly. And that's all part of that financial equation, that you are working with an piece of intellectual property that is much bigger than the movie that you are making, because it's this juggernaut. So how do you make sure that you are working within the framework that is going to satisfy what the studio or the financiers want this to accomplish for this piece of intellectual property, and also make a movie that can stand on its own and has some of your own voice in it?
Well, for me, coming into the third film, I had felt very unsure. It's like, well, it's like number 3. I want to do number 3 of something. But then I felt, and again, when Marvel supported this, I said the only way I can really make this work for me is if I can try and make this feel like a standalone thing. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily have to watch the other 2. You should, but don't have to. You do. But then, so I wanted to do a good service to Thor and to the franchise, but I had to like concentrate a lot on like making it one of my films more than anything, because otherwise I just wouldn't have been happy. And also, coming into the third film, so, you're following some big filmmakers and stuff, and how do you put your voice? How do you bring your voice to it?
This is just something that you have to resign yourself to, that you have to fit a little bit into a mold, that the template has been created, and you can do something within that framework, but you can't break out of the framework itself.
Well, this is the first time I'd done it. It's also the first time that I wasn't the writer, that I hadn't written this script. But yeah, for me, I felt like you talk.
No, I think you're being very modest. I think that point of entry is very important.
Yeah.
I think the fact that we came from indie world, they treat us a little differently. I mean, I've seen them treat directors that come from the commercial world, and I think it's a relationship you're trying to build. I think when I first went to Fast, the studio I think went through 3 changes, and I didn't even know who was running the studio at one point. Mm-hmm. People were but it was. They picked me because I came from the indie world, so that was the only process I knew. I only speak the language a certain way of process, And then with success, they kind of you develop that relationship. They let you do the way you want to do it. But I think it's important to, like a lot of times now, people are like, "Oh, you just show up and you start designing action." I'm like, "Well, I can't think action until I know what the movie's about," and that's my process. So so when I went to Paramount to do Star Trek, by then they did their homework and they knew I had certain process and reputation maybe, and so I could see it carrying over. But I think coming from the indie world, they're picking you because of your indie. Right.
Well, my films beforehand, I mean, I think thematically and tonally they all share a similar thing, and there's like this humor, but there's heart, and like there's a depth to them, and there's humanity, a human touch behind them. That if that didn't exist on a film like Thor, would just be very hard to watch and very hard to engage, because look what you're dealing with, in that movie. It's just, she's got antlers, and she's got, there's like, I mean, all those elements in that movie are ludicrous. But if there's, there's some sort of, there's a human voice behind it, or there's if you're trying to kind of connect with the audience that way, and that was really the only thing that I could bring from my previous films.
Catherine, what about you, about working within this framework of this franchise that ultimately at that point, nobody had any idea how big Twilight was going to become, but certainly the studio knew that they had a huge investment in this.
Well, ours was, mine was really different because ours was the first one, and Twilight had been rejected by all the other studios, so actually nobody thought it was going to make money. So they kept a very tight budget for it, and every time I'd go back and say, hey, there's a fan base, and they want to see this scene, they'd go, oh, there's just 300 girls in Salt Lake City that's the fan. They thought that was the whole fan base for Twilight. So they kept saying, no, no, no. I'm like, I think it's more than 300 girls in Salt Lake City. But anyway.
That's amazing, because they listen to the fans so much now.
Yeah, well, they were actually, the weekend before it opened, on the Thursday, they said, if it opens in the 30s, we're going to be so excited. And it opened to $69 million.
Unbelievable.
Which was, so nobody actually understood what it was going to do. And so I was lucky for that reason. I could make it more like an indie film, and it was the first one. I could cast Kristen and Rob and, Discovery. There's nobody known in the movie, so I had a different experience than these guys.
There is a film that's showing at the festival. In fact, I think it's showing this afternoon, called 8th Grade. And if you all haven't seen it, you should check out 8th Grade. Yeah. And there's this great scene in the film where a high school senior takes a 8th grader, a rising freshman on campus, to show her around and say, this is what high school looks like. These are the challenges. This is how you negotiate these things. This is what it looks like. I'm going to be your tour guide for a day, your shadow. Is there such an equivalent in Hollywood where you're going onto a big studio film and there's somebody who's going to tell you the things to look for? Maybe it's a producer, maybe it's somebody else who's like, this is what this is going to look like. These are the things you don't have to worry about. Is there some sort of guide that you had or wished you had that would make that graduation a little bit smoother and maybe not quite as difficult as it might be?
Yeah, I wish I had one, yeah.
There's no such person.
I would have loved to have that.
Yeah. But no, it doesn't exist.
But we're trying to do it actually, with Reframe and Women in Film and Sundance is trying to create a stronger mentorship program, to help up-and-coming female filmmakers, to guide them exactly. That's one of our goals, yeah.
We talked about the department heads that you work with when you're starting out. What about the actors that you work with when you're starting out, and how much you feel and want to bring them along with you? And what became of the actors that were in like Better Luck Tomorrow? I mean, what John Cho is one, right?
John Cho's one, Sung Kang. It was interesting because after working on Better Luck Tomorrow, I went and did the studio film, and I thought, I mean, they're as talented, if not more talented, than a lot of people I'm working with, And so it became very clear that it was an issue of opportunity. And so to be able to go in there and say, hey, I want to cast them, it wasn't a favor or anything like that. They were talented and they deserve to be on screen. And look, it's been 15 years and it was a lot harder back then. Diversity was like, they weren't casting Asian unless they knew Kung Fu or something, And it's weird now that like they're actually, oh, we got to go more diverse, and you're like, I know, like.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was talent's there, just creating opportunities.
Catherine, what about you? The people you worked with in your early films.
Nikki, I wrote 13 with a 13-year-old girl, Nikki Reed, and so I was able to cast her in Lords of Dogtown and Twilight. So I've been, bringing her along, and so that's kind of cool. And as awesome as often as you can, if it's the right role. I love to work with people that did me a solid early on when I needed the help. Yeah.
Yeah, I think with to what you were saying. It's also the same with the HODs. People never question. Oh, I want to bring this DP with me.
This is
but acting's still part of one of those jobs on set, and just because they might not be famous doesn't mean they're not actually. Usually, they are better than than the bigger celebrities. Because they're more committed and they're more hungry and they want they want to do good work. And there's no baggage that comes along with them. So I've always used. There's a little handful of people that I always use in my films. And also it makes me more comfortable because there's a shorthand when you're working with them. All my friends, when we were growing up making films, there's a shorthand where we can just say straight up, "That was shit. Just do it again. Do it better." Like that, instead of like going, "Oh, your character this morning. Yeah. Well, when they woke up, they couldn't feel their legs. So use that." And it's like you got no time for that most of the time. You're scrambling to get your day, so you're just like, again, faster. Just say the words fast, as fast as you can. And that's it. And that's like usually that's the only direction I do.
We have saved some time for audience questions, but before we get to that, I'm going to ask you all a last couple of questions. Was there a scene, a moment, something that you really had to go to bat for that you lost in making a studio film that you might have been able to preserve if you were making a film on your own, independently, not with studio assistance? Can you think of an instance where there was something that you felt important to the story that you couldn't pull off for whatever reasons, that had you been making a smaller budgeted film, you might have been able to figure out a way to shoot? Taika?
Yeah, there was a scene that I wanted in the film, which was, and in hindsight, it has no business being in the movie. It was a good thing that they shut it down, but it was a flashback to Thor and Loki as kids, and it was going to be like an 80s version of Asgard, where everyone had like mullets and like massive shoulder pads and stuff, and it was going to be like them as teenagers, sort of like a kind of Pretty in Pink sort of flashback. And yeah, I mean, it was dumb idea, but I felt very passionate about it in the story room.
That's pretty awesome.
I want to see that.
I'd like to see
that. Catherine, what about you?
Oh, actually, I had the opposite. The other things that I wanted to do, for example, in Twilight or any of my studio movies, I got shot down because of budget. So I never got to do the scenes or the effects that I wanted to because they always kept me to a very tight budget.
Wow. Justin, what about you?
I haven't had that experience. I feel like part of...
No one says no to him.
The $2 million overturned bus guy.
Old flipper bus, Justin.
I feel like it's part of the process is if you work with the right people, you learn how to fight the right way. And I think when people are passionate, usually everybody's trying to make that happen. That's an important process that I think sometimes people, if you're not on the right length and you're misreading things, I think the film hurts because of it. But if you really believe in something, you got to go in there and look, they're different people, but I've worked with people that like to fight, and you want to have the right arena to fight. And we've always been able to figure out, how to get that on screen.
Oh, and also one thing, I'm sure you guys have done this, you can also kind of bluff your way through some things where you pick one thing to fight for, so they ignore the other thing you're slipping into the movie, and you're like, I really want an 80s flashback, and then you stick this really weird joke in, and I did that a lot.
This is my last question. Are the satisfactions and rewards of making a big budget movie fundamentally different from making a smaller independent film? And if so, how would you define the differences?
It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. I think when I first started the switch over, it was, I thought that indie is my heart, it's my soul. I still love it, but I think I want to transfer that over. Even if it's a pilot, you want everyone to be proud of it. Even in failure, you want to be proud of it. So I think it's our job to set that tone, and the fights are the fights, and you go and you commit and you go. So,
Catherine?
Well, for me, 13 was a more incredible experience in a way than anything else because we got invited to film festivals all over the world. So I picked every country that I'd never been to. And I'll go to Greece, I'll go to Rio. And then I told them, hey, I used to be an architect, I'm a surfer. And they all they'd give me a filmmaker that took me to surf in Rio or took me an architecture tour. And then we just had this beautiful, each festival, what the movie meant to people in every country in Japan, what it meant to people in Japan. You just went deeper by going to all these festivals, meeting all these awesome people like you guys that love films. So that was a better experience for me than just like a studio release. I just love that experience of being with other filmmakers.
Taika?
Well, I think the biggest difference was the scale, and when you've made movies for nothing, you're always aware of like you're just seeing like money burning all around you. Just like, what do we need
Why
that?
is that person
Who is
even
that
here?
person? Like, who are these people?
Why are they sitting down?
What is that? So you constantly it's like, what is that? And but I say the biggest here's a classic example. The 2 weeks before we started shooting, they're like, Taika, we're going to give you a director's tent. I'm like, what? And then they're like, yeah, so what do you want in it? I was like, oh, guys, look, I'm an indie at heart. Yeah, just give me an Apple box. I'll sit next to the camera. Just want to be there with the actors. 2 weeks into the shoot, I'm lying on a chaise lounge. I'm not joking. Chaise lounge in my tent, looking at the TV screen with a cheese platter and a microphone. More energy, Kate. You're very easily spoiled. It's very easy to forget yourself. But I am still indie at heart. I came up to this mountain. But then I think the similarity, the thing I carried over was like, because I don't even know what a techno crane is. I saw one, I was like, what is that? And they're like, oh, that's how you do these shots. Like, that's how you do those shots in the movies? I don't know the name of half this gear, but I do know like character and like how to make conversations. And at the end of the day, for me, it's just I can shut all that out, and for me, it's like what's in the rectangle. And usually, it's just two people trying to remember their lines, or say them fast. So like, and that's it. And it's the same any movie scale. Like $1 budget, $1 billion budget. It's just people in a rectangle, and you're trying to convince you that they like each other. Right?
So we have handheld mics. I'm going to ask people who are asking questions a couple things. Make your questions short, no speeches, or how much you love these panelists. I know you do, or you wouldn't be here. And we'll try to get to as many as possible. And the handheld mics are wandering around. So I'll go to the way back. Of course, I'm going to make my mic runners go.
You could
go ahead
just
and
yell.
stand up. I think there's a...
Yeah.
We have a mic, because I think we're recording it. I think it's better if you wait for the mic.
Hello? Oh.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So how, could you each share with us how you made it into the director's chair for your first independent feature, and how you got the financing for that film if you're a part of it? Because I think most of us here aren't, big-time independent filmmakers wishing we could get into Hollywood. Okay. We're all nobodies trying to make our first independent film, and that's where I'm at. So I could use advice on how to even get through that barrier.
Okay, so quickly, each of you, how you got your first movie together?
I was at UCLA Film School. I grew up in a working class family, so I didn't know anybody with money at all. So I remember just working on it, and when I felt like I was ready, I had saved up some money, some cash. I think it was like $10,000 or something, 20. And then I took 10 credit cards. I totally do not recommend it. The interest rate on that is, when it accrues, it gets big fast. So I don't, but I do, it was one of those things where I was hitting an age and I felt like I was growing and I had to try something. So it was a credit card movie. And then it got into this and it changed my life.
Oh. Catherine?
Okay, I had been working my butt off as a production designer on other people's movies. So different producers saw that I really worked hard and I was really prepared. And I wrote the script with Nikki, and it was very powerful to me what this 13-year-old girl was going through. So I took it immediately to one of the producers I just finished working with on Laurel Canyon, Jeff Levy-Henty, sent it to him in New York. He kind of liked it. Then I went to an event at David O. Russell's house, and I was just full of excited about my project and telling people about it. And this woman said, I work with 13-year-old girls too as a counselor. Let me read the script. And my husband is a producer, and it was Michael London. He went and read it that night, and by 10 in the morning he called and he said, I want to help you make this movie. And I said, when Jeff just said yes too, would you guys meet each other and maybe this will work out? And then it was tears and everything to get it made. But,
Wow, great.
you know, like just your burning enthusiasm, and I made lookbooks and I shot little videos of Nikki and her mom in the war zone, you know. I was so passionate as opposed to emotional about it or whatever. Anyway, I was so into it that I just couldn't be stopped in a way. Because when they said, well, wait a year to make it, I said, no, I'm making it in 3 months when Nikki gets out of school so I can do it over junior high. And whether you're with it or not, I'm doing it with my camera and my car and my house. And they're like, okay, we'll get on board. So
Taika, what
then we
about
got $1.5 million somehow out of it.
I started making short films, and yeah, I just made many short films. I did, you know, I kind of stumbled into film storytelling. I'd done a lot of other things before that, and yeah, I made films, and then eventually they just started getting noticed. My first 2 films came here, and so that was like that kicked things off for me really, is this festival. And then I wrote my first feature. Came to the labs, was lucky enough to get into the Sundance labs and develop that. And really it was just, you know, I'd say sort of relationships and networking, but it was many years before I made a film here. So I always went back home, which is a bit easier for me to make stuff, and, you know, I just sort of, yeah.
Yeah, if you can get into the lab, the Sundance lab, it is amazing. Yes.
next question. Let's get a woman who's, okay, right here in the gray sweater.
Hi. I was wondering if any of you guys are holding on to passion projects that you are yet to get made.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there's a whole garage. I call it Ghost in the Garage. You know, all the ones that I've done everything and storyboarded and scouted and photographed and shot previses for. I think, doesn't everybody?
Yeah, I definitely have, but mine are more like one sentence. Diagrams you can fly.
Yeah, there's a Steve James documentary, Abacus, that got nominated for an Oscar. Yep. I met the Sung family, and that's been a passion project, and been working on the script and hoping to shoot it this fall. So I think it's always good to kind of keep that going. It's hard to just do one thing for me, and it's going to be, I think it's a great story that needs to be told, and I'm gonna call Technocrane and get a free rental for the shoot and stuff, and use every connection I have to.
I can tell you how it works.
Let me follow up. Is this a passion? Are these passion projects that could be back at Sundance in a year or two? Would that be appealing to you to come back?
One of mine could be. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. We have programmers here, so we'll know they'll look for them. Right here in the hat. Yes. Mike's coming down. I'm sorry, this is totally random and unfair, but that's life.
If you could, I guess each individually, if you could give one piece of advice to a director who's only ever directed shorts and was just hired to direct a feature that's not theirs, but hired to direct it, what advice would you give this very terrified female director who has no idea what she's doing?
Hypothetically, that's hypothetically
totally
terrified.
hypothetical. Don't know this person at all.
I think for me, it's to be able to say no, and to be able to fight for your vision. You know, that was my biggest lesson when I was in the credit card movie. Was that I've always thought I had to do whatever to get the funding, and I think when you do that very quickly, you see how fast you can compromise. And I remember there was one moment where I was meeting with potential investors, and they were going to invest $25,000, and they made me write essays and everything. It was just crazy for months. And finally, we go meet, and he goes, "Wow, we don't want to give you any money." And I remember I was driving home. It was like an Arby's on Sunset, and I stopped, and I called them, and on the payphone, you know, back in 2001, I was saying, "Fuck you guys, this is going to be the greatest film because of this, and I was articulating my vision. I hung up. By the time I got home, they're like, "Oh, we want to invest." Don't be afraid. They you know, the smart people that want to work with filmmakers, they want to trust, and I think you gotta be able to say no.
Catherine?
And backing that up, be as invested as you can in it so you can be that passionate, you know, like really, if you didn't write the script, so now you've got to dig into that world and meet as many people in that world and, you know, really feel like, get it in your bones so that you can be that passionate and know every detail. And then I'm big on preparation, so just really do all the prep and shot list and think it through every way and all your cool techniques that you like?
I'd say just, back, what you're saying, back yourself, because so many times, especially when you're first directing, you've got people who have got more experience on set or more experience in editing who try to school you on things. And they're, oh, your idea won't work because of this, and then they just try and give you their advice. I'm giving you advice, but but if you believe it should look a certain way or it should be cut a certain way, you just you have to do it, because you'll never be, if you never do it, you'll kick yourself for the rest of your life thinking, I should have done that because I know it would have worked, and I just I listened to some old dude who tried to mansplain to me.
Or one of your actors might be.
Yeah.
I had my first one, Holly Hunter's Academy Award-winning, Best Actress, and at one point she goes, I don't even know why you put this scene in here, and it doesn't make any sense to me, and we shouldn't even shoot it. And it was a very important scene, and I had it so deep in my bloodstream that I was able to say, after she said that, I said, can I talk now why I put it in? And I explained it, and she goes, great, let's shoot it, So, I knew it in my bones why it had to be there, and I was able to say it. But all the research, knowing every detail, you need that backup, yeah.
Way over here, because your hand has been up for 5 minutes straight. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Fernando. I'm a filmmaker from Brazil. I see that most of the films here in Sundance have a very sharp purpose and message. But I see that when it comes to Hollywood movies, most of the messages, they go very soft. Do you guys see any connection between purpose and budget? The higher the budget, the soft the message?
Yeah, good point. Justin? Let's talk about the message.
Justin, take over.
You're on your own, mate. Justin.
I'm not here to fight for Hollywood, but I can say that, I think it's always art and commas colliding. I think you can sit in a room and people can, I have this project going out now, and it's all passion. We want to tell the story. And the level and the control I want, they go in and they put in their formula. And a lot of that goes into distribution, P&A, everything, in whatever formula. I don't understand how that works. But I think things work differently. I think when we were trying to do, let's say I'll use Fast and Furious as an example, I think that when we started, it was trying to connect, hopefully, in a global level. So it was a very different agenda, I would say, on that. It wasn't, we were trying to deliver sharp indie messages on Fast and Furious.
But it does have a big message because it's all diversity.
About
you
how
see
it's cast.
The poster is amazing, and so it sneaks it in through entertainment.
Yeah, that's what, thank you. That's what, ultimately, I think, you're dealing with, you have to understand what you're dealing with, I get that there's that pressure, but at the same time, I also feel like there's projects out there that are going to be big budget, that are going to get made, that's going to have a very sharp message, But it is a very different process. Filmmakers, we all go on different paths because of our relationships, because of who we are. But I do think that why not have both? I think everybody should be out there doing their thing. I think that's why Sundance is so great. That's why Sundance can, Sundance shouldn't be supporting things that have soft, messages.
Yeah.
I think that's the whole point.
Well, Thor, you think, oh man, it's a bit of a soft message. It is, up until now, no one was highlighting the trials and tribulations of space Vikings. And, no one was looking at what they go through, and trying to save a planet. We're all like indie filmmakers, like, oh, it's a story about my uncle. Oh yeah, this really happened. Those guys up there, they also need their stories told.
Catherine?
No, I think that there's 1,000 ways, like through massively popular entertainment. In both movies, we saw diverse characters on the screen. That's really fucking cool because that's sneaking into the bloodstream of global population that we want to see other faces that don't look like ours. Great. even, whatever, vampires, we tried to, fight against the pale skin and sneak in vampires of different colors.
Vampires, no one's talking about vampires.
Yeah, people don't care.
What they go
but even so, we still try to sneak into entertainment. I made Bella a vegetarian, they visit a worm compost thing, whatever, like everything you can do, you kind of sneak it in, and then it just becomes part of like the culture in a subtle way, without beating you over the head and preaching.
We probably have time for 3 more questions. I'm going to go here, right here. Yes, your finger's up. Wait for your mic. It's coming.
Justin, this is going to be for you.
Yay.
Okay, so I
and on
see
your back.
you go from an indie film, and then you go to Fast and Furious and Annapolis, and then I see that you go to Community, and you have a few episodes that you directed there. What type of transition is it going from a huge blockbuster all the way down to, a 30-minute comedy TV show?
I mean, it's interesting because a lot of times, you go indie to studio. I remember after Better Luck Tomorrow, I go in all these great meetings and get free lunches, and they're like, oh.
Lunches, I just got water. Women only get a water.
You get what?
I'm just saying, okay.
I only got
and the big question is, can you do a real movie, a studio movie with real actors? That's what I was getting back, and I think, and then when I go do the studio, they're like, oh, he's a studio guy, he's not indie. But it is what it is. I can't control how people perceive me, but I personally like trying things and be a little scared, and Community was amazing. I think when, I went to school with Joe Russo, and it was, he called me and said, hey, do you want to do a few episodes? And people are like, oh, you can't, you're doing big movies, you can't do episode. And I'm like, no, let's go. And it ended up being some of the best experiences of my career. And I like I said, context and perspective is very important to me. I like jumping in and doing even network pilot just to, you guys shoot all that in 15 days.
That was super fun for me.
Yeah.
I did 3 pilots. It was like wild.
Catherine and Taika, you've been working in TV as well. Why is that a good alternative now, and what's going on in TV that you can take advantage of?
Yeah, I mean, I know other filmmakers probably do commercials and stuff. I don't get a lot out of commercials. I love kind of the pressure of getting in there, especially pilots, because you're trying to set the tone, you're trying to set the character, and then, network pilots are very different than cable, too. It's a different process, different people. So I feel like I like to get, I like to be a little scared and see if I can fight my way through it. And comedy to me.
You have to do in 7 days.
Yeah,
it's like crazy.
My biggest lesson out of it is, man, comedy is so hard. And it's like, my thing is, it feels like if you're there on set, you're only halfway there. It is so like, and if you don't get it on camera, you can't visual effects your way out of it, And so I love it. It's great. And that's why, and then when I did Star Trek, it was like, oh, great, I have this great cast, but I have 360 green screen. So I'm trying to apply a Community to Trek, and it all comes together, and just trying to keep that energy going.
And Taika, aren't you taking What We Do in the Shadows back to TV? Is that right? Or
yeah, we're about to shoot a pilot for that. We're not in it, which is good. No, but and for me, I just like working, and like no one realizes, like, especially if you just like, oh, I'm only going to do features, like 2 or 3 years before you're back on set, and you get on set, you're like, oh man, how do you do this again? So it's about exercising the muscles and being confident and working with crews and working with different people, and because you need people skills, you need to know how to lead this team, and and the politics and all the egos and the emotions on set, just between the crew, not actors aside, even with crews, the way that they're so dysfunctional and so like, they're always bickering, and it's really like just working with like just 100 5-year-olds, So, and you're like the parent, and but I'd say like I love going back to doing. I've only done comedy, I'd say it's the harder of all the mediums, because an audience is unforgiving. If you don't know in a drama, you're like, oh, I think they liked it. In a drama, you should be worried when they're laughing. In a comedy, it's the other way around, and I find it way harder.
When you do TV, do you get the chaise lounge and the cheese platter? Did that?
No.
That didn't come along. Way back, yes, with a big head of hair. Yes, you.
Woo.
Hi, this question is directed towards Taika, and you guys can contribute, but earlier you spoke about fighting for scenes so that you can sneak something in, and after seeing Thor, I feel like there was a lot of indigenous values and native humor peppered in there, and is that something you fought for, or was it intentional, or do you feel like that just shines through your art?
I didn't. The spirits warning me. I wasn't fighting to put that stuff in. It made me feel a little bit more comfortable in working with all these elements that I had no real relation to. I can't relate to any of these characters, you know. So for me, like making these worlds or having these little things I could pepper in, like the spaceship that they escaped from Sakaar on. We basically just took the Aboriginal flag and then just spread it out over the spaceship. No one knows that, and they don't need to. But it's made me feel good, and the people who knew made everyone feel good. And every film that I've done, we always kick things off with basically a welcome to country from whatever tribal group whose land you're on, and that for me just sort of sets the right tone. And we get we had Aboriginal interns, tried to cast people and put them in. And just for me personally, it's like a gesture, but also it just made me feel more at home, because in New Zealand it's very common to do that, and it's not even really a question. You don't really even say, oh, I've got to put more brown people in. It's it's just they're in it. They're there. So yeah, it was for me just about making me feel a bit more comfortable in a world where I was very nervous.
We have time for 2 more questions. So again, I'm going to be totally unfair. Let's see. Here with the P hat, the P baseball hat.
Oh, not him.
The P hat.
When all the money you're given allows you to shoot a scene the very first way you think about it, do you ever find that not having to constantly go back and think about how you can make it work with a budget disconnects you too much from the story and doesn't get you to think about better ways to make the movie?
Like necessity not being the mother of invention, I guess. Or maybe. Go ahead.
I've never been able to do something the very first way I thought about it, or we develop it. You develop it with other people when the stunt coordinator comes in and the VFX person comes in. So it's kind of evolutionary more for me,
Yeah, for me the script is usually just a sort of guide, and we usually just change it all on the day, and that keeps things feeling a bit more fresh, and there's always new jokes or new ideas, or and I think actors prefer it as well, because it just I don't like watching things where it's like my line, your line, my line, So I want a sort of a messiness to it. That's how I work.
Justin?
And I never have enough money. I feel like on the low budget,
There's never
you
enough
have
money.
On the big budget, you never have enough.
Never enough money for this guy.
No, I love having discourse all the way through. On the smallest thing, sometimes it sets the tone for everybody, and so that on the day we can then. You don't improvise because you're going off. You improvise because everybody understands the essence of what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah,
and trying to
you go
make
in
it
with a
even
plan.
better,
Yeah, you should never just turn up and go, I don't know what the scene's about. You go in with a plan, prepared that maybe I'll throw that away, but you've got to prepare.
Or maybe it's going to get better because Heath Ledger's going to, in my case, throw in something even better that I didn't expect, and that gives me another idea, then that gives you another idea. So.
Very last question. You,
all at once.
Yes, you. Stand up and be heard. I hope it's a good one.
It'll be good.
Pressure's on.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the women thing. very briefly again. John, you've interviewed me, and Catherine, you and I have been in the trenches a little bit here. I'm the one who instigated the ACLU investigation and the EOC investigation for women directors. I've been hearing so much wonderful talk here at Sundance about, you know, the women and the need to hire more women, but I'm always hearing about inside industry solutions and not so much about the fact that outside pressure, you know, that the EEOC, that federal pressure and the ACLU and the magnificent work that they've been doing has really done so much. And I just wonder what you think, if that really has been influential, and what you think about the final negotiations between the 6 major studios and the EEOC ongoing now that should be wrapping up soon,
Catherine?
and how that might influence our work.
Well, I mean, I do think that everything that's happening out in the world on every level is helping. You know, it seems like exactly what you just said, I'm going to say it wrong if I repeat it, is very important, and that's, you know, good that it kind of scares people a little bit and puts them on notice. All the other positive ways, you know, Wonder Woman, that's a positive way. So on every level, I feel that there is a difference, that there's a light shined on it now. It can't be ignored, and people are trying, dinosaurs trying to crawl out and change, you know, and slowly but surely, you know, I know, yeah, this movie that I just got on, you know, they probably would have felt guilty if they didn't hire a female director. And like I said, everything that everybody's doing is helping make these incremental changes. It's not going as fast as we wish, but it's moving, I think. I don't know.
We could talk about this subject and the rest of what we are talking about for hours, but we have to turn the theater over for another screening. First of all, before I thank the panelists, I want to thank you guys for showing up. For all of your questions, heard and unheard, and I want to thank Taika, Catherine, and Justin for their time. And finally, Sundance for inviting us up here and sharing the stage with us to let us tell these stories. So thank you all very much. Have a great rest of your day.
If I could just ask you to stay